This year's NDAA will continue our momentum in rebuilding and modernizing our armed forces. It will authorize the personnel, equipment, tools, and training we need to reinforce the national defense strategy and to deter great power rivals like China and Russia. It will cement our advantage on the seas, on land, in the air, in cyberspace, and in space. And the bill will help us continue to recruit, retain, and support the men and women who keep us safe. It provides a pay raise for the troops, improvements for military housing, child care, and more. So, Madam President, for the brave men and women of the United States Armed Forces, failure is simply not an option. So when it's our turn in Congress to have their backs, failure is not an option either. I would urge my colleagues to support this legislation one more time when we vote tomorrow. Now, on another matter, on Sunday, President Trump signed into law another historic bipartisan rescue package. It will provide major support to American families through what we hope will be the home stretch of our fight with the coronavirus. Congressional Republicans, Congressional Democrats, and President Trump's senior team had all worked together to pass hundreds of billions more dollars in urgent assistance to the people who need it most. This new law will set up a targeted second round of paycheck protection to save jobs. It will renew and continue federal programs that have helped laid-off workers endure the crisis. It will send more cash to households. It will invest billions in vaccine distribution so the success of Operation Warp Speed kills the pandemic as fast as possible, and much more. This bipartisan compromise was our shot at getting help to working families on the urgent timeline that they need. Once again, I want to applaud President Trump for signing the bill and getting this much-needed assistance into the pipeline. During this process, the President highlighted three additional issues of national significance he would like to see Congress tackle together. First, as he explained, the President would like further direct financial support for American households. Second is the growing willingness on both sides of the aisle to at least re-examine the special legal protections afforded to technology companies under Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act, including the ways it benefits some of the most prosperous, most powerful big tech firms. And the third subject, since every American, regardless of their politics, should feel the integrity of our democracy is beyond reproach, is exploring further ways to protect the sanctity of America's ballots while continuing to respect the federal government's limited role in standing behind state and local government who actually run elections. Those are the three important subjects the President has linked together. This week, the Senate will begin a process to bring these three priorities into focus. I move to proceed to calendar number 480S3985.
The clerk will report.
Motion to proceed to S3985, a bill to improve and reform policing practices, accountability, and transparency.
It's unanimous consent that following leader remarks on Wednesday, December 30th, the time until 1.
Leanne Caldwell, Garrett Hake, Jonathan Lemire, you're all still standing by. Leanne, let's talk about what McConnell just announced. He announced the defense override veto plan for tomorrow. We'll see what Bernie Sanders has to say about that, because he's planning, I believe, to filibuster or to challenge it until he gets a vote on the stimulus checks. And we're waiting to hear from Senator Schumer on the stimulus checks. What are we now expecting to see on the rest of the votes coming up in the Senate?
A lot of moving parts here, of course. Let's just look at Senate process. The override of the veto of the National Defense Authorization Bill, that is a process that if all time is used, if all members don't agree to move quickly, it could take up to 4 days to do so. So we're watching a couple of senators who could demand all that process, all that time be used. That includes Senator Rand Paul and also Senator Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders has indicated that his problems with the National Defense Bill, something that he didn't support anyway, but he's trying to leverage that for an up or down vote on a $2,000 direct stimulus check that is also in the Senate's purview now as well. Another thing that Senator McConnell just said, which was very interesting to me, is that the Senate would begin focusing on the three issues most important to the president on Section 230, the stimulus bill, and voter fraud, which he calls voter fraud anyway. So we're going to be watching how McConnell deals with that, Andrea.
And Senator Schumer, Leanne, is now on the floor saying that there is support for the Senate on the stimulus bill. He wants to push that forward as a standalone bill. Let's listen.
Defense bill and the $2,000 checks before we go home. We will start the process on overriding the president's veto of the defense bill tomorrow. Today, at the end of my remarks, I will ask the Senate's consent to take up the House-passed bill to provide the American people immediate survival checks of $2,000 a person. Throughout this pandemic, working Americans have taken it on the chin. Right now, they're facing their hardest and their darkest days. Tens of millions have lost their jobs. Tens of millions are struggling to put food on the table, keep a roof over their heads. In the wealthiest nation on earth, modern-day bread lines stretch for miles down American highways. The fastest way to get money into Americans' pockets is to send some of their tax dollars right back from where they came. $2,000 stimulus checks could mean the difference between American families having groceries for a few extra weeks or going hungry. The difference between paying the rent or being kicked out of your home that you've lived in for years. It could buy precious time for tens of millions of people as the vaccine thankfully makes its way across the country. Of course, we could have taken up this issue weeks ago. In the COVID bill Congress just passed, Democrats wanted generous direct payments to the American people. Speaker Pelosi and I repeatedly asked our Republican counterparts how much they could support. Their answer, $600. It was a compromise many of us were not happy about. I came to the floor myself with the senator from Vermont to ask that we double at least the size of those checks. A Republican senator objected. $600 was the most Republicans would support. Well, my colleagues and my fellow Americans, $600 is not enough. Not enough for the mother in Nashville, $4,000 behind on the rent, whose water was shut off earlier this month. Not for the medical receptionist in Macomb, $2,100 behind on the rent, whole electricity shut off in September on her son's third day of virtual kindergarten. Not for the 12 million Americans who have fallen on average nearly $6,000 behind on their rent and their utilities, or the 26 million Americans who have had trouble putting food on the table in the past 5 days. $600, nope, it's not enough. So in a moment, I will move to have the Senate take up the House bill to increase that number to $2,000, which I might add had broad bipartisan support. I don't want to hear that we can't afford it. I don't want to hear that it would add too much to the deficit. Senate Republicans added nearly $2 trillion to the deficit to give corporations a massive tax cut. Republicans just fought to include a tax break for 3 martini lunches in the COVID relief bill. So I don't want to hear it that it costs too much to help working families get a check when they're struggling to keep their jobs, pay their families, pay their rent, feed their families, and live a halfway normal and decent life. Even in our deeply divided times, Madam President, this issue has united Americans from coast to coast and bridged the massive political divide here in Washington. A vast majority of the public, Republican and Democrat, strongly support $2,000 checks. An overwhelming bipartisan majority in the House supports 2,000 checks. Senate Democrats strongly support $2,000 checks, even President Trump. supports $2,000 checks. There's one question left today. Do Senate Republicans join with the rest of America in supporting $2,000 checks? Now, some of my Republican colleagues have said they support the checks, but there's a major difference in saying you support $2,000 checks and fighting to put them into law. The House bill is the only way to deliver these stimulus checks before the end of session. Will Senate Republicans fight for a vote on the House-passed Cash Act, or will they look some other way? Will Senate Republicans stand against the House of Representatives, the Democratic majority in the Senate, and the president of their own party to prevent these $2,000 checks from going out the door? We're about to get the answers to these questions. So now, Madam President, I ask consent to set the Madam President, where am I? Would the senator modify his request to include a unanimous consent request that the Senate proceed to the immediate consideration of H.R. 9051, a bill received from the House to increase recovery rebate amounts to $2,000 per individual, that the bill be read a third time and passed, the motion to reconsider be considered made and laid upon the table with no intervening action or debate?
Is there objection to the modification?
Object.
Objection is heard. Is there objection to the original request? The senator from Vermont.
Thank you, Madam President. Reserving the right to object. We should all be very, very clear. The working class of this country today faces more economic desperation than at any time since the Great Depression of the 1930s. And working families need help now. Not next year, but right now. Last night, the House of Representatives, with a 2/3 majority, 275 to 134, 2/3 bipartisan vote, moved to increase the direct payment going to working families from $600 per adult to $2,000 per adult. The House did the right thing. I congratulate them. And now it is time for the Senate to step up to the plate and do what the working families of this country overwhelmingly want us to do. Madam President, as a result of the pandemic, tens of millions of Americans have lost their jobs and their incomes. These families in the middle of the winter now face the threat of eviction and the possibility of being thrown out in the streets. Hunger in America is at the highest level that it has been for decades, with moms and dads struggling to feed their kids and working families lining up mile after mile to get emergency food packages. We are even seeing an increase in grocery store shoplifting as desperate Americans try to keep their families from going hungry. All of this taking place in the wealthiest country in the history of the world. Madam President, over the last number of years, as I think everybody in America knows, Congress has provided massive tax breaks for the very wealthiest people in our country, which is one of the reasons why today we have more income and wealth inequality than any time since the 1920s. In fact, in the midst of this pandemic, this terrible pandemic, Inequality has grown worse, with many in the billionaire class seeing their wealth increase by hundreds of billions of dollars, while average Americans struggle to put food on the table. Congress has given huge tax breaks for large corporations so that some of the most profitable and largest corporations in America today pay zero in federal income taxes. We have just passed the largest military budget in the history of our country, $740 billion, more than the next 10 nations combined. And by the way, there was almost no debate about the size of that huge budget. Trump's veto dealt with other issues. Meanwhile, over 500,000 Americans are homeless. Half of our working families are struggling to survive paycheck to paycheck. And in the midst of this terrible, unprecedented pandemic, over 90 million Americans are uninsured or underinsured in the midst of a pandemic, and they're not sure whether they can afford to go to a doctor.
Good God.
Madam President, we are coming to the close of one of the most terrible and painful years in American history. That is a tragic fact. Over 330,000 of our people have died from COVID-19, and as we speak, we are seeing record-breaking numbers of new cases and hospitals around the country being overwhelmed with new admissions. During the last year, the education and well-being of tens of millions of our young people, from childcare to graduate school, has been disrupted. And the terrible emotional isolation that this pandemic has caused, where people are unable to spend time with their family or their friends, has resulted in a huge increase in mental illness, drug addiction, and even suicide. Madam President, as I mentioned, the House has done the right thing. By an overwhelming vote, Democrats and Republicans voted to increase that $600 direct payment to $2,000. Recent poll came out. 78% of the American people think that was the right decision. They're hurting. They want help. The leaders of our country, President Trump, President-elect Biden, Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, are all in agreement. We have got to raise that direct payment to $2,000. So that is where we are right now in this historic moment. Do we turn our backs on struggling working families, or do we respond to their pain? So, Madam President, would the senator modify his request that immediately following the vote on the veto override, the Senate proceed to the consideration of H.R. 9051, that the bill be considered read a third time and the Senate vote on passage of the bill without intervening action or debate. Further, that if passed, the motion to reconsider be considered made and laid upon the table.
Is there objection to the request for modification?
Object.
Objection is heard. Is there objection to the original?
I object.
Objection is heard. Under the previous order, the Senate will be in a period of morning business with senators permitted to speak therein for up to 10 minutes each.
Oh, sorry.
Well, you've heard Mitch McConnell objecting to Bernie Sanders' proposal for a vote on the stimulus checks right after the veto override vote. And you've heard the objection from Senator Mitch McConnell as well to Schumer's proposal for an immediate vote on the stimulus checks. Leanne Caldwell, Garrett Cake, both with me. We are now going to be in Senate gridlock for a while, Leanne, as the days wind down and the issue of the $2,000 may very much be held hostage to the veto override or vice versa.
That's right. These two issues are absolutely now connected. McConnell has a choice. Does he let the stimulus issue die and let the veto override process go up until Saturday, the amount of time it takes? That's the day before a new Congress is seated. Or does McConnell try to give his members who need perhaps a vote on the stimulus bill down in Georgia some sort of vote on that? There is a lot of questions and a lot of unknown answers at this point, Andrea. So the story is not over yet in the Senate.
Better you than I up there on Capitol Hill today, Leanne. Thanks so much for all of that. Garrett, you know the Hill as well as anybody, and you're down there with the president, who's probably out on the golf course and not watching this and worrying about it. But there will be an impact in Georgia, where the senators have flipped on their support and now are supporting the $2,000, which they had long opposed. The Republican senators, I should say.
There absolutely will be an impact. There absolutely will be an impact in Georgia. And the thing to remember about Mitch McConnell is this. He just got reelected. His entire constituency in his mind right at this moment is 51 fellow Republican senators, and really primarily those two who are running for reelection. His calculation here, he does not care how unpopular his decision to block that vote just now may make him in the rest of the country. If he can set the table up favorably for those two Republicans running for reelection in Georgia, that's the way he's going to look at this right now.
Garrett Haake, thank you so much. Leanne Caldwell, thanks to you. And we'll be back in just a moment. Mike Memley as well ahead. Why has the federal government fallen short on its goal of vaccinating 20 million Americans by the end of this week? I'll be talking to Admiral Brett Giroir about the rollout and what can be done to speed it up. Stay with us. You're watching Andrea Mitchell Reports on MSNBC.
Proof is in the pudding pertaining to our government that has failed its own people. Not only did they fail us towards recognizing how lethal that this pandemic is, but now we've gone from 20 million down to about 2 to 4 million people that has been given the vaccination shot. That's horrible. That's absolutely horrible. The situation right now pertaining to the finances, which is in conjunction with what's going on with the virus. This should have been addressed probably about 3 months ago, at the very latest, in regards towards how many people was sifting through the cracks of your working class and your poor class, pertaining to not being able to afford to make their own car payments or their own house payments or their rental property. For them to even be coming close of debating this, of going from a $600 check to a $2,000 check of those that deserve it and need it. To me, it speaks volumes about the corrupt government that is no longer working effectively and efficiently for the American people. Whenever you have such of a dire scenario going on right now pertaining to the coronavirus and the after effects of what that it has actually done to schools, hospitals, factories, and people's lives. And then you're going to get up on the floor and you're going to debate it for whatever reason. It speaks volumes how that this government has failed its own people. Even the communist-controlled countries over in China, whenever they had a major lockdown, didn't put this type of a burden upon to its own people. You keep in mind, these people that are late on their car payments or their house payments, they're just not late on that particular payment. There's penalty fees. There's all kinds of different things that they'll be charged for that they normally never would have been charged for, in addition to breaking the original contract to the point that now the mortgage holder, whoever they may be, has the right now that they can actually go in and take the vehicle or make you move out of your home. In dealing with what we're dealing with right now would be the same thing if FEMA throwed up its hands during the process of a major event that has occurred pertaining to our hurricanes that has been outlandish for the past, I guess, 25, 30 years that I can remember. I ain't never remembered storms being so intense like they are today. I mean, there were some bad ones that went on before I was ever born, but ordinarily they only come about every 50 years apart, and in some cases only 100 years apart, as far as being that horrific and causing that much kind of devastation, like in the Galveston, Texas area. It would be the same difference if Congress, the Senate, voted to pull the resources out of the bottom of FEMA during the process of Hurricane Katrina. In other words, stand up and tell them, hey, we're no longer going to finance you. You're going to have to finance yourself if you plan on going down there and helping those poor, miserable people that just got through being swamped by the hurricane. It would be the same thing, because the people during a major hurricane needs help. The American people right now in today's society needs help. Whenever we have a government that is no longer being efficient and effective towards paying us back for the investments that we have made, we have been the ones that have sacrificed tax-paying money to go to fix not only the roads that we have to travel down pertaining to the potholes, but we are the people who have established these entities so that if there was something that come up, we wouldn't just be lame ducks in having to go down with the sinking ship. That's been one of the promises in regards to this government. The same thing with our retirement system that we've set up. Whenever you have a government that can no longer provide adequate funds to those who have reasonably earned their retirement, then you no longer have a reasonable, adequate government. Then you have a broken government. You have a broken system, especially during the middle of a pandemic that would be the same of the consequences that are involved in people's lives as if a Hurricane Katrina, come in and destroyed property and people's lives. We, as an American society, have to figure out ways of being better than this. Because I truly believe that our ancestors who come before us, that originally designed these programs, they knew that there would be challenging moments, but at the same time, they had designed these programs for these particular purposes. And whenever the government that we're paying our taxes for can no longer provide those services, those programs, you have to start scratching your head of saying, wow, maybe we're throwing good money to a bad ideal here or to a bad entity here, because now whenever the government's back is against the wall, because the people's back is against the wall. The government cannot provide for the very people that created that program. It's really sad whenever you have somebody like Mitch get on the floor that wants to adjourn or appeal, whatever words that they're using, towards basically being against that in which what the original guy talked about towards needing to be passed. Whenever you have this type of resistance, you have a broken government. You have people in higher chambers towards the conglomerates that could care less about the pain and the suffering of individuals that's going through what they're going through right now. To me, there should be some sort of reform with the banking industry, because eventually they're going to be the ones that's going to take it on the cheek. Don't think that they're not, because as people was living in their homes was still being lived in. Their homes, by and large, deteriorated in profit pertaining to the value of that home. Same way with a car. Even though they haven't made a payment for 4 or 5 months, they're still in that car. They're still driving that car. So the value of that car has went down in the past 4 or 5 months because of the miles and the people driving the car. So who's going to take this on the cheek? Inevitably, regardless whether we get the stimulus check or not, it's going to be the banking institution that's going to take it. They're going to have to roll over and reform in how they practice their practices. If not, I guess they're going to just come in and wipe us all out, take us all over. And if that was to happen, I'm pretty sure there would be a resistance movement that would begin on the level of a civil war. Especially whenever you go to displacing that many people out of their homes and away from their natural environment. I'm pretty sure that you would probably see things happening in the USA that you would not even begin to fathom of what could possibly happen. And it may happen anyway. I hope to God that it don't, but it may happen anyway, because people become very, very dangerous once they feel like that they have nothing else to lose. You take an individual who has worked 10, 12, 15 years in paying for his mortgage. He's got a house. He's got responsibilities. He's got payments on this, payments on that. He's already strained to the end. Now he don't have a job. His wife don't have a job. The resources are sure enough drained. And he feels like that he has been a loser, an unsuccessful human being that could not provide for his or her family. Once you demoralize that individual that way, let me repeat it. Once you demoralize that individual that way, you ordinarily take away all self-esteem pertaining to their morale. Once you take away their morale, it's kind of like rolling over and being defeated pertaining to a major sickness in your mind. Once you give up in your mind pertaining to you never going to recover and you're no longer going to fight for life, ordinarily, you'll see not only that person's mind start slipping away, but you'll see various organs and you'll see various people start slipping away too as well. It's got to do with the morale. It's got to do with demoralizing that morale. And if you demoralize that morale for whatever catastrophic event that may happen, from A to Z, it could be either or, then you'll start seeing a decline of human life like you cannot even begin to fathom. While I was out working the Katrina damage for about 6 months, the first 2 to 3 months working with FEMA, working with the Corps of Engineers, working with various volunteers, helping in the Katrina kitchen, helping counsel with people, helping move debris. It was nothing unusual for the first few months of hearing 5, 6, 7, 8 gunshots in the period of a day. And I become curious enough, I asked somebody, I said, what the heck's all those shooting going on? And that particular individual knew what it was, and he looked at me, he said, because that's people taking their lives. I go, oh my God. And if they wasn't taking their lives by a shotgun blast, they was taking their lives by overdosing, ODing, or doing other things to themselves that they shouldn't be doing to basically take their own lives. Once more, whenever you take the main ingredients of the formula to be able to drive a person to another level pertaining to existence, whenever you take that away or you damage that to the point that they no longer have a morale, no morale at all, they feel defeated, they feel like that the whole world has turned against them, they feel like there's no hope in sight, then is whenever you will see the loss of life such as you've never seen or experienced before because of a major catastrophic event. And this catastrophic event can be a hurricane, a tornado, a sickness. It can be a divorce. It can be because of other people losing their jobs or losing a wife or a husband. It can be because of a pandemic. It can be any of the above. And like I said, our ancestors formigated the resources, the programs in this government to be able to help protect us in a crisis like this. And whenever the man from Kentucky can't see that or understand that, as far as I'm concerned, he is not fit to hold his position pertaining to dereliction. That is why the people expects people like that that's in those type of higher positions so that they can get the help. It is one of the most saddest scenarios that I believe as a human being, as an American human being, that I think that I could ever see that would happen in the USA. Now, if this was a banana country, a banana republic pertaining to a third world country that had not established itself, I could maybe see certain things like this occurring towards the big guy, the big brother, no longer taking care of little brother. But whenever you have an American government that was supposed to have been as strong as what we made out to be, pertaining to our numbers, pertaining to our country, and then you see people being let down, can't even get a proper vaccination shot on time, and the government steadily, or various people in the government, lying to us, just like Trump saying, oh, it's all just going to drift away in a few months, it'll just pass. Well, guess what, Mr. Trump? It hasn't passed. We're still under the same criteria of being in a crisis. It has affected everything from A to Z. From a local football game down the road to a college game to the NFL game. It has affected everything from NASCAR to other types of events to where money was moving, people was making money, money was transferring from one hand to another, and taxes was being generated out of that money, being moved from one hand to the other. Whenever you become stagnant, the money quits going from one hand to the other as quickly. And because of it, the lack of the resources Dueno. We was supposed to have had a bank set up for emergency problems such as this. As I said a while ago, it would be on the same level after Hurricane Katrina hit if somebody got on the phone and called up FEMA and all other state and federal personnel and told them, okay, guys, show's over. Want everybody to come back home. We no longer have adequate protection, and we no longer have adequate resources to be able to take care of your needs while you're down there. Shut the door, turn your back on those poor people, and go home. That would have been the most cruelest thing, and I'm hypothetically speaking here, that would have been the most cruelest thing that FEMA and all other first responders could have done to Katrina problems and people like Katrina problems in regards to a major storm. A crisis. Today, pertaining to the coronavirus, it is not no different than a hurricane or a tornado. We as a society here in America is supposed to have banks set up, resources to be able to protect us in case of a falling illness. That's the reason why we have things set up towards bankruptcy, to where people can file bankruptcy, but yet now, maybe at the end of the bankruptcy, they can still maintain their home or their business and maybe have a fresh towards starting over again. Now, there's no doubt that those particular resources have been taken advantage of here in America. And there's no doubt that because of that, it has helped to drive the national debt in the direction that the national debt has been driven off into, which we have no one to blame but ourselves for allowing for this to have occurred. It's different if you have to file versus because you just want to file. But when you have something that is this big, and you know good and well that they could have fought for a $2,000 check 3 or 4 months ago whenever they know people's resources was dilapidating, because we've seen on TV lines after lines after lines towards people for the first time seeking some sort of aid, regardless whether it was food or whatever, of these various shelters that was set up all over America. Whenever you have people working in the White House that is not recognizing the seriousness of the problem, just like you have people in the White House that did not recognize the lethalness of the coronavirus, you have an unproductive government, a broken government, a failed government. And it's not because our ancestors didn't originally set up these programs and these resources, because they originally was there. It is one of the most saddest occurrences that the American people have had to endure in the year 2020, in the year of the Jubilee. I am so heartbroken and heart-stricken about this, that it in itself has helped to detour or dilapidate my morale. And once my personal morale starts getting dilapidated and deteriorated, the next thing you know, my health takes a turn towards growing even worse than what it did before. Once more, things is based around morale. And whenever you have demoralized that morale, you start seeing people committing suicide. You start seeing people that's not taking care of themselves. You start seeing things that normally you don't never see in a developed country such as America. You only see things like this in an undeveloped country, in a banana republic. But now it's happening right here in the USA. And it's not just happening on the lower end, but it's happening across the board from A to Z, from the top all the way to the bottom all the way to the top. It's affecting every aspect of our lives, either directly or indirectly in some sort of way, even if you haven't never caught in a coal, or even if you're not in the position of having deteriorating health, it has still affected you in some way or another towards listening to this and being exposed to this type of atmosphere. This atmosphere did not exist in 2019, as Donald Trump keeps wanting to boast about. In 2019, we was huffing and puffing, man. We was blowing smoke, and we was rooting and tooting. We was going, man. Until all of a sudden, we come into 2020. 2020 has changed people's lives forever. Forever. This is going to change us. Hopefully for the better. Hopefully for the good. Hopefully there will be some sort of a silver lining that's going to come out of this towards humbling people and making them be more like people again. But in the meantime, we got to deal with what we're dealing with, and hopefully we can minimize the collateral damage and the pain and the agony and the hardship that has befallen up into our lives. Father, eternal God, if there's ever been a time that we as a society, especially a Christian society, needs to stop, evaluate, and analyze our personal lives, including myself, towards walking the walk and being that in which what you have chosen for us to be. If there's ever been a time that we needed to look into the mirror and say to ourselves, am I that in which what God truly, truly has asked me to be? And if we're not, which once more, I'm talking to myself, I'm preaching to the choir here, we need to stop and evaluate our lives to say, okay, what can I do to make the adjustments to be that in which what God has called me to be? To do that in which what God has called me to do. To be that person that God has called me to be. What must I do? What can I do? What do I need to do to be that in which what He has recognized as being insufficient? And from there is where we start cleaning our own platters. From there is where we start sweeping out our own front porches. From there is where we start getting the mote out of our own eyes so that we can possibly help to get the bean out of our brother and our sister's eyes. There has to be a beginning to re-reforming. There has to be a beginning towards a true revival that will escalate into a turnaround in all of our lives. And it begins with us. It begins with me. What have I done that was short? What could have I done to have helped this situation not grow into what this situation has grown into? How could I have bettered this particular scenario that has occurred, regardless of what it may have been. Right now, I'm talking to myself. But you have to start asking yourselves questions if you're ever going to truly reform. And you may say, well, I don't need to reform. I go to church every Sunday. I believe in God. I pray. I try not to cuss so bad. I try not to smoke. I try not to do drugs. I try not to do this and try not to do that. And I'm not saying that you're not trying to do all those things, but maybe there's something else lacking. Maybe you truly are trying to do the right things. And once more, I'm preaching to myself. I'm preaching to the choir. But there's still something that the Heavenly Father is requiring for you to do. Now, no one knows your life better than you. No one knows my life better than me. The individual right now that's getting this shot, no one knows what's going on inside her heart and inside her mind and inside her body better than her. She's the governor of her existence. So are we. So I can't tell her what she either has or has not done, or what she needs to do or what she don't need to do pertaining to standing up pure in front of the eyes of the Holy Father, the creator of this universe. Just like she cannot do the opposite towards myself. The only person that can do that is the person that wants to do that. And the only way that you get that want to is that you have to first believe, get out of denial that you're not where you should be with God, and that you're going to do it in the year 2021. And I do hope that that is people's New Year's resolution, their promise, that they are going to try every being within their body of being closer to God and being more of a I forgot the right word now, in existence towards what Christ was, that we need to become even that in which what Christ was. Let's watch the rest of this real quick and see what else they're going to talk about, because I know some of my messages that I've been putting out here lately has been entirely too long. This is the health guy. He talks about the coronavirus. I think one thing that's confusing with a lot of the newscasters is that they'll jump from one event to another event, and they don't stay on that one subject long enough for it to really have a real bearing in what people are listening to or watching. You know, if you keep in mind, how did I begin this particular session to my viewers? I began with it pertaining to what that they was saying on the floor as far as what they was voting on pertaining to the stimulus, $2,000 stimulus check. You know, whenever you get so caught up in all this other stuff, the next thing you know, you start forgetting what the first subject was about in regards to the problem with the $2,000 stimulus check. I think I'm probably gone far enough right here. Let me go forward just a little bit more right here. Whatever they're talking about here, I'm pretty sure it's got to do with the sorrows that has befallen upon to the American people. So let's stop it right there.
Schumer and McConnell go at each other this morning. Bernie jumping in, trying to get, use the leverage of the defense bill to try to get the stimulus checks to people. The president jumping in the middle of all of this. Will the stimulus checks even come through, this $2,000? Will the $600 make a difference as the economy is slowing down and people are really in desperate need? What can Joe Biden do, in fact?
Well, you hit her just right. I mean, this is obviously an economic story that can be told in economic numbers and metrics, but it is a humanitarian crisis. It's a crisis about our neighbors, our friends, our fellow Americans. You know, when you look at numbers like the unemployment rate looking like it's doing better at 6.7%, the truth is that the Economic Policy Institute and others think that true number is closer to 11.2%. There's estimated right now that 36% of Americans are having trouble just paying normal expenses. 17 million children are facing some kind of lack of food. 17 million in our own country. And I think there's just more hardship that's going to come. And you can't look at just the worker who's been teleworking and doing well. 3 times more low-income people have lost their jobs. They're hurting. And I think this could continue. And the state and local side, it's not about some financial issue. It's about 1 million educators and teachers.
It ain't that it could continue. It's going to continue. We have taken it on the chin. The American work class load. Now, the people that's already got some sort of a fixed income pertaining to their retirement or their disability or whatever, as long as their check comes steadily in the mail every first of the month, ordinarily they've already made their changes to the degree that this has not affected their lives quite as substantial. But keep in mind, those same people that's on these fixed incomes, ordinarily, unless they're just lucky and very talented and gifted, ordinarily they're budgeted out every month within a few dollars towards going in the red based around their income that they're getting off of the government resources. So because of that, their hands is basically tied to the point that they can't help whenever something like this occurs towards going down and getting $50, $100 worth of groceries, which you could probably put in 2 bags now, and taking it down to the food bank, because they themselves are right on the edge to the point that if they start giving too much out of their resources, then they're going to wind up being short. How about all these churches that's went out here and built these buildings? These big conglomerate churches that now the people has quit coming to the congregation towards being able to give their contributions that they've already pledged that they was going to pay. How about all those people? Next thing you know, you'll have churches shutting down. Next thing you know, you'll have churches foreclosing on their loan officers. One problem affects the other problem, just like a set of dominoes. And in conjunction, it is a crisis. And to think that they get up at the house and they can't see this, they can't understand this.
You've already lost your jobs. It's about whether the state and local governments you were just talking about are going to be cutting back on housing assistance, cutting back on first responders, because they're facing a $500 billion shortfall that is due to the pandemic, not their own fault. So right now, if there's one big message, everybody needs to stop worrying about whether we're doing too much and worry deeply about whether we're doing too little. There is no evidence that a short-term increase in the debt to help our fellow citizens, to recharge this economy, to help the people who have lost jobs or lost hours. There's no evidence that that is going to in any way hurt our economy. There is lots of evidence to suggest that if we don't give more direct relief, if we don't help state and local governments, if we don't help the people who are really hurting, the people who are $30 to $70 billion behind on their rent, we're gonna see real pain. We're gonna see a real loss of dignity for people who've worked hard their whole lives. And yes, it's going to slow down us getting back to full employment economy where everybody can work and prosper.
And in fact, the delay over the weekend, and as the president didn't immediately sign that bill, led to 2 unemployment programs supporting 14 million Americans to run out. So those have to be geared up. People are living day to day, as I say, joining the food lines. We only have about a minute left, but the president-elect is talking about the initial stimulus checks and COVID relief being a down payment, that more is going to be needed. But what is the chance that the next Congress is going to agree on anything big enough?
Well, if anybody has any doubts how important the stakes are in Georgia, the only thing that we can all agree on is that this is a down payment. It is an important down payment, but it's a down payment. And even if all this goes through, people are going to be running out of unemployment. 20 million people are going to be running out in 10 weeks. You already have people, as you say, not getting their checks. There's even debate about whether people will lose a week. So, one can hope that this check goes through. That $2,000 could mean everything to families who are right on the edge. But you have got to hope that even in divided government, that the Biden administration can press every day how much pain is going to happen to so many working families who did nothing wrong other than be alive in 2020 during a pandemic.
Gene Sperling, as always, thank you so much. A very happy New Year to you and your family. That does it for us for this edition of Andrea Mitchell Reports. Casey Hunt is in for Chuck Todd next with MTP Daily, only right here on MSNBC.
Thank you to my viewers for listening. I want to wish everybody a happy new year. I know this year has been one of the roughest, toughest, hardest years that we have seen probably since the Great Depression. If you really look towards putting the dots together, I truly believe towards what happened in 1918 pertaining to the pandemic, of how that it had such a profound effect upon people's lives, actually opened up the door towards the collapse of our government that occurred in 1929, that began the Great Depression. And that's exactly what's going to happen again with all these failed loans and all these failed resources. If our government cannot hold the people up during the time that they need to be held up, we'll never be able to maintain on our own what we was maintaining before the coronavirus ever hit. You keep in mind whenever I'm going to use a hurricane for another example. Whenever Hurricane Katrina hit, it was one of the most devastating blows that America at that time in the 21st century had ever experienced. Ever. As far as property damage and human toll. What's going on right now? Though we're not seeing property damage, it's still having a wide effect upon the other things. People's lives are dying. People's employment is deteriorating. People's hope is deteriorating. If I was to make a guess, a calculated guess in what we're going through right now in comparison to Hurricane Katrina, we as an American citizens are experiencing about 25 to 50 Hurricane Katrinas that's happening to the United States of America right now, all at the same time. And it's happening on the West Coast, just like it's happening on the East Coast. It's happening in the South, just like it's happening in the North. It's not just one designated area that covers the span of 150, 250, maybe 300 miles. No, no, no. We're talking about the span of about 3,000 miles. And we're just talking about what's happening right now in America. We're not talking about what's happening all over the world, France, England, Europe, Asia, Australia, Canada, other parts of the planet. We're just talking about what's happening right here. Happy New Year to all of us. And good luck to all of us coming from the Windmill Ministries here at 291 Thompson Road, Sharon, Tennessee, zip code 38255. We need to pray for each other. We need to look at ourselves and evaluate who we are and what we are in the eyes of God. And that includes myself. Thank you for listening, and shalom.
Brushing only reaches 25% of your mouth.
And thank you for allowing for us to be a part of your lives. Thanks.